Hi, welcome to the Dave Pamah Show. Now, what separates great leaders from everyone else isn't what they do when everything is working, is what happens when the system comes under pressure. My guest today has spent decades leading through exactly those moments. Welcome to the Dave Pamah Show. I'm Dave Pamah. Around the world, we often judge organizations by the results we see, whether it's a business, a public service, a government institute. But the real story is usually hidden beneath the surface. The biggest challenges aren't simply about profits or performance. They're about people, trust, decision-making, and how leaders respond when the pressure is on. Today's guest has lived that reality at the very highest level of corporate America. Keith Wyche is a former executive at IBM and AT&T, former president of US operations at Pitney Bowes, former president of Cub Foods and ACME markets under SuperValu, and later played a key leadership role in Walmart's e-commerce transformation during one of the most significant periods of change in retail. Today, he also serves as an independent director of Brinks and has spent years writing and speaking about leadership built on integrity, trust, and character. Keith has spent a career leading enormous organizations through change, disruptions, and uncertainty. That experience gives him a unique perspective on something that affects every country in the world: how leadership shapes the system we all depend on. Keith, welcome to the Dave Pamah Show.
Dave, thank you so much. I appreciate that introduction. My mom actually would really like to hear it, so I'll send thanks to you in advance on her behalf.
We've got to big you up. We've got to big you up somehow, so my show does do that with people. So, but we're on to the really serious stuff here. So, Keith, you've led organizations employing thousands of people through periods of enormous change and pressure. Looking back over your career, what have those experiences taught you about what leadership really is and what most people misunderstand about leading large systems?
Yeah, the first thing I do is I try and, call the definition for what I call uncommon leaders. And those are folks who put integrity, humility, and serving others ahead of ego, personal gain, or profit. Through 40 plus years of working in corporations like IBM, AT&T, and Walmart, Pitney Bowes, I've seen that the best leaders are the leaders who do two things. One, they understand that while performance is important, you have to get it done through people, and respect for the individual is the best way to handle that. So it's really been an up and down journey here in the States. We're a very capitalistic society, and if you're not careful, you'll end up chasing profits at the expense of people.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's in my profession, I did as an ex-firefighter, but of course I was an officer as well. Well, manager kind of, officer, but not the highest as in fire chief, but it was all about people really. At the end of the day, you're saving lives, in my profession, but the more close you are to people and as a leader, you're respected, I guess.
Yeah, and it covers all areas, so there's a political aspect of it, you're politicians, there's the business aspect of it, and there's even the faith-based aspect. Let me give you some details. So there's a Edelman's Trust Barometer in 2025, and this is a global survey of 33,000 respondents across 28 countries. 7 of 10 respondents believe that government leaders, business leaders, and journalists deliberately mislead them by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. There was a Pew Research study in the United States about public trust in government. And in 1958, 73% of Americans trusted the federal government to do the right thing almost always or most of the time. By 2007, Dave, that number dropped to 30%. And today, as we sit in 2026, it's down 17%. So only 17% of U.S. citizens actually trust the government to do the right thing.
Yeah, wow. Well, many people only see the finished outcome, a successful company, a failed organization, or a difficult decision, but they really see what happens inside. So I've got 3 questions. What actually changes inside an organization when pressure begins to build? And what do frontline employees experience that executives often don't? And how quickly can culture change during those difficult times?
Yeah, I've worked with companies going through change and transformation, and during difficult times, there's a lot of pressure on everyone. Particularly if it's a publicly traded corporation, the shareholders are putting pressure on the CEO and the board, which then flows downstream to the actual workplace. And so you have to be careful because too often the blame game comes up, right?
Yeah.
If something's not working, instead of trying to fix it and solve it, it's whose fault is it? So that's one thing. The other thing is information starts to get really tight. People stop communicating and sharing. And when that happens, Dave, I find that people, particularly the frontline worker, doesn't know what's going on. And so they make up in their head the own reality of what's going on, which is usually far worse than reality. And so those are two things. The third thing is sustainability. It's hard to sustain a company and keep it going in tough times if you don't create a vision of the future, how we're going to get out of this, and your role into it. Too often we don't go down to the front lines and say, hey, here's the vision, here's where we're going, here's why it's important, and here's why you play an important role. Because people want to know what's in it for me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And that's really what you got to listen to, I guess, is it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, across both public services and private organizations, because obviously that's mainly what I did, was mostly public services, but you probably could argue yours is more private. But the words leader and manager are often used interchangeably. But from your experience, what's the real difference? Can someone manage effectively without truly leading? Or have you seen organizations become overmanaged and underled?
Yeah, you can run the risk of both. I would say, first of all, managers manage processes, right? They're the folks who give the orders and give the instructions.
Yeah.
Leaders, however, are people who not only oversee the process, they create the vision, they create the culture, and they help empower others to do the job. My thing, the number one job of as a leader is to create other leaders who then create other leaders.
Yeah.
And so too often managers, and I was a manager one time. I'll give you a story that you'll appreciate. I worked for IBM, and around 1992, I had enough. I had been there 6 years. I had been a top performer, and I didn't get the promotion that I thought. And so what I did as a cocky kid, I left. I said, I'm leaving. But in leaving, I talked to an associate who was there, and he said, Keith, let me tell you why you didn't get promoted here. You weren't a leader. You were a manager. You were just making sure that the sales got done. You didn't care how hard you worked the people. You didn't care if you got along and was with your colleagues. It was all about performance. It was all about you hitting your numbers. If you're going to be a leader, you have to be a leader that creates followership. And you didn't create followership. And here's how you create followership: by creating trust. And the formula for trust is character times competency times consistency. And that's what a lot of managers lack that a lot of leaders have.
Yeah, that's a pretty good formula, actually. I never thought of that one. Managers and coaches in sports, of course, you call football, we call football differently. You call it soccer. But of course, we understand it's a similar kind of thing in terms of managers, coaches, players. That word we know interchangeably globally. But they always, we still call football managers, but they're actually called coaches, head coaches. And the leadership could be the captain of the team. It could be someone creative on there, and even off the pitch. They're a leader in terms of what they say about the team, and it doesn't have to be from the manager, does it, or the coach?
No, it can be a leader just from the rank and file, from the team itself. It can be a leader. It's funny, you were talking about coaches, and in our football, in our country, you have our coaches. And you have something called cheerleaders, right?
Yeah.
And I said, most leaders, are you a coach or are you a cheerleader? And here's what I mean by that. A cheerleader's only job is to say, go get them, rah, 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 win.
Yeah.
A coach is actually saying, hey, let me show you where you made a mistake. Let me show you how you can improve. Let me show you how you can get better. And that's what real coaches do. By the way, sorry about the FIFA World Cup there, but...
oh, I know, yeah. Well, you've seen your country, so what can we say? But yeah, no, that's right, exactly. And that actual model works everywhere, because actually coaching got derived from sports coaching, then it went into business coaching.
Yes,
then coaching's everywhere now, isn't it?
absolutely.
And
And
as I
everyone
say,
needs a coach.
and as I say, they kind of use the word coach and manager in soccer in this country interchangeably, as the actual head coach, so that's why that's quite interesting. And to actually kind of like illustrate actually what the difference is that a leader could be someone on the pitch actually leading and also off the pitch.
Yeah. And just the other thing too is just because they're the manager or the coach don't mean they're the best players. In our
No,
country,
that's right.
some of the best coaches never played the game,
Yeah,
but they can
exactly.
help people be their best
That's
by
right.
observing and giving them advice and counsel.
Yeah, that's right. Fantastic. Well, you spoke about trust. So whether it's retail, banking, healthcare, emergency services, or government, trust seems to be one of the most valuable assets any organization possesses. So when trust starts disappearing, firstly, how does that affect decision making? Secondly, can organizations measure trust? And third, is rebuilding trust harder than building it in the first place?
That's a great question. And I always say that trust is earned in drops, but it's lost in buckets. And so I
Wow.
say that to say that it takes a long time of those drops of trust to fill that bucket up, but just one drop of that bucket and you lose everything. And so trust is essential. And it's one of those things that you have to have, because if I can't trust you, then now I second guess every decision. I second guess everything you tell me. It's hard for me to follow you. And so, I mean, even in relationships, if you can't trust your partner, if you can't, it creates a whole lot of problems. And so,
That's even worse, isn't it? Because you're living and breathing each other, literally. Even when you're not
absolutely,
together, you're thinking about each other, So
yeah. And if it's not trust, you're sleeping with the enemy, right? And so, it's really important. It's foundation, right? And I look at it like building a house. Trust has to be the foundation. If you don't have a solid foundation, I don't care whatever else you build on the upstairs, flat, downstairs. If the foundation isn't solid, the house will eventually fall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a great analogy there. And there is a saying: it can take 20 years to build a reputation, 20 seconds to lose it. And then that can happen.
Absolutely. And I think what happened here, and I can't speak for the whole world, but we got into this mentality here in the States that it was all about power and money and prestige, and fast earnings. And so people start doing making foolish decisions and taking foolish actions that really weren't to the benefit of the culture, because a culture of distrust is not sustainable. You just can't. And so the best leaders know that you have to mean what you say and say what you mean. You have to be honest, even if you're delivering bad news. People would rather hear bad news up front and honestly than not to tell them at all, because again, there's that trust factor.
Yeah. And also with that, you've spoken extensively about integrity and truth. So it's easy to talk about values when everything's going well, but when organizations face financial pressure, competition, or crisis, how difficult is it to protect those values? And have you ever faced moments where doing the right thing has carried a real personal cost?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll give you a story where it took a personal cost to me. I was running Cub Foods, grocery store chain in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it was time of year for the Gay Pride Parade. And I was written letters and emails and got calls from a lot of religious leaders saying that I should not support the Gay Pride Parade, that, I just, it's against, the Gospels and all this. And, I had to make a decision, right? What do I do? And I thought about it, and I had counsel, and I said, a lot of my workforce are part of that community. Our customers are part of that community, our suppliers. And so I am not going to, disparage them or ignore them at the expense of others. And so I made the stand that we would support financially, as we always had. And it didn't sit well with everybody, but I was able to put my head on the pillow at night, knowing that I treated people with respect for the individual. I may not agree with you. I may not agree with your lifestyle, any of that, but I respect your right to be. And that was a lesson that, again, I learned, took a hit for it, but I would do it again.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's human beings with feelings, aren't they, really?
Exactly.
There was the Black Lives Matter, global during the pandemic, and you can imagine how that went rippled in around the world with just one event.
Yeah.
And coming out of our community, obviously with the, women's situation, the same things going on. So yeah, there's quite a lot of I don't know. In Africa, it's a real big problem, because actually you can go to prison or even get killed. It's life imprisonment or even death penalty, for that kind of thing. So
absolutely. There was just a story about a couple of cruise ships who couldn't dock in certain countries, Turkey and Egypt, because of those types of things. And so again, at the end of the day, as a leader, there are times when, and you have to have, whatever your values are, you have to hold on to them. Because again, in business, particularly in the States, you will be tempted and people will try and bribe you and do different types of things. You have to be safe and comfortable in who you are, what you stand for.
Yeah.
Right. And there's times that may cost you. There's certain deals that I didn't get because I'm in Las Vegas with a client and they want me to go somewhere, a gentleman's club that I didn't want to go to. And I said, hey, if that's going to cost me the business, that's going to cost me the business. But I can at least go home and look at my wife and know that I was, a man of integrity. So there are times you'll get bribed. When I was working for Walmart, the biggest retailer in the world, you can't imagine how many vendors would try and offer things under the table or, a set of golf clubs, whatever, and you have to have the fortitude to know who you are and what you believe to say, no, that's not who I am.
I'm just wondering whether you should be where Donald Trump is right now, because he's the opposite with what's going on at the moment. But anyway, that's a
podcast all into itself.
Let's not go down that road anyway. Yeah. Well,
but let me tell you a little bit why I wrote the book, though.
Yeah, sure.
Because I wrote this book, Uncommon Leaders, a blueprint to restore integrity, trust, and people-centered leadership. Because I was sitting a couple of years ago with my teenage grandson. Yeah. And it was one of those news nights, David, where everything was about a CEO who got caught kissing somebody on a webcam. There was a religious leader who got caught with his pants down. There was a business leader who was stealing money. And my grandson said, "Pops, is that how you lead?" And I said, absolutely not. And what bothered me about that, David, is because emerging leaders don't learn ethics from a poster or on values. They learn it from watching what people do before them. And I was just afraid that if we're not careful, we're going to be in a country or a world where the leadership examples that we're setting are not what we really want our children and our grandchildren to follow.
Absolutely not. No. And then kids do, they copy things. So the younger kids asking questions, well, like I'm talking like from elementary school to early high school years, they're going to be looking at all that role modeling, and that's not what you want them to see, is it? And
at all. And you have to
understand their own father. That's even,
Yeah. And as a leader, and as even a father, everything about you sends a signal, right?
Yeah.
People watch you more than they listen to you, right? And so, you have to understand that everything you say, every decision you make, something as simple as when I walk in my grocery stores with my team, if I see trash on the floor, I bend down and pick it up. You know why? Because if I don't, I've just told everybody with me, it's okay to walk past trash on the floor.
Yeah. Lead by
everything
example.
Sends a signal.
Lead by example. Yeah, great. Well, when did you write this book, and or when is it being published if it hasn't?
The book just became published yesterday.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so it's available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and Walmart.com, and those places. But it just came out. It took me about 2 years to write it.
Yeah.
And in it, I interview other CEOs. I have interviewed other leaders to get their perspective. There's a chapter I will share with you that I really love. And it's the last chapter. It's called Leaders Plant Trees You'll Never Sit Under. And that's about leaving a legacy.
Okay.
Right. Because a real leader to me creates an environment and a culture where after he or she's gone, that organization still goes on.
Yeah.
That they've created this tree of leaders where there's branches and they go off. And so to me, the real impact of a leader is the legacy that they leave behind.
Essentially what you're saying is people be sitting under that tree thinking they wouldn't even know the leader that created that in the first place. Is
exactly. I'm providing shade and fruit and coverage for people generations after me.
Yeah. So if it was a bad leader, there'd be a lot of bad apples in there.
Absolutely. No, but that's true. There's a story I share, and I'll share a bad example because to me, leaders ought to be transparent. So I wasn't a great leader starting out, and I was so set up about time, Dave, that if I had a meeting at 9:00 and someone wasn't in the room, I would lock the door, put their chair outside, and say, well, because you were late, you don't go to the meeting. Well,
Yeah.
that wasn't the best way to lead people, right?
Mm.
And so again, you have to learn, but I learned that from a leader I had before. And
Yeah.
so, we always learn from our leaders, either what to do or what not to do. And
Yeah.
fortunately, over time, I've learned what not to do.
That's the best way, yeah. But sometimes you learn from mistakes as well, which obviously I've had and here or both, so yeah. Well, one of the things of this podcast is that different countries often experience remarkably different or similar systems failure. So whether we're discussing business, education, healthcare, or emergency services, what leadership principles do you believe apply everywhere in the world, regardless of culture or industry?
I think that the number one is, again, that you have to have integrity and be truthful and trustworthy in that role. That's the first thing. The second thing is you have to be a person who can create a vision of the future, create a strategy, and then after you create it, help people get behind it and that they can follow it. And then most importantly, a leader, again, creates other leaders. So investing in people, helping them grow and develop. Those are things that transcend country, religion, you name it, language. And so those are the things that I think the great leaders do. And one last thing I'll leave you with on that is I think the great leaders not only explain the what or tell the what, they tell the why.
Yeah.
Because if people sometimes understand the why you're asking them to do something, you'd be amazed at how quickly they get in line. Particularly, from a generational perspective. I'm a baby boomer, but when my millennials that worked for me and my Gen X and Gen Y, I had to explain the why. They weren't just going to follow it because I said it. It was they needed to understand the why. And the good leaders will take the time to say the why, and they'll be careful on the how.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's good that also we're thinking about that analogy with the tree, that you never sit under the tree that the leaders formed. That leader don't necessarily have to be a manager or anyone great. It just could have been someone in the crowd that just actually set an example for people. A manager, that became a great leader, took it from a really, good example of a leader that's only an employee, for example.
Exactly. To me, leadership isn't assigned, it's demonstrated, and the credibility comes before the title comes. I had a store, you'll get a chuckle, it was a snowy day in the store, and one of the regular hourly associates went and got rock salt and shovels and brought to the front of the store. Nobody told him to do that. Nobody asked him to do that. But the leader in him said, hey, people are going to be coming in because of this inclement weather looking for these items. I want to make it easy for them. Those are the leadership traits, curious, continuous learner, aggressive and assertive. Those are the things that we look for in future leaders.
Yeah. Yep. But not aggressive in a violent way or in
more assertive, assertive than aggressive.
Yeah. Well, lastly, if someone's listening today is leading a team or hopes to one day, what habits or ways of thinking should they begin developing now that will still matter 20 years from today?
That's a great question. And the number one thing I talk is about being a continuous learner. You have got to keep being a continuous. You can't rest on what you learned yesterday, right? And that's the first thing. The second thing is intellectual curiosity. One of the things I fear about AI is that it's taking people's ability to think away. I don't have to think. I don't have to be a critical thinker. And so making sure that you are a critical thinker. And then the third one, it may surprise people, but it's working on your interpersonal skills.
Yeah.
People, everything we do is through people. Nobody gets to the top by themselves. It's other people. And sometimes with technology and texting and all those things, if you're not careful, you can lose that touch of just the human touch of talking and communicating with the person. Yeah. So I think those are three important things.
Yeah. No, like doom scrolling on TikTok and stuff like that. It's not really going to do anyone any good at all. Well, Keith, thank you for joining me and for sharing not just your career journey, but the lessons you've learned from leading some of the world's largest organizations through change, complexity, and pressure. Conversations like this remind us that leadership isn't simply about authority or results. It's about the system we build, the trust we earn, and the people whose lives are shaped by the decisions made every day. Thanks once again for coming on the show, Keith.
Amen. And thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
It's a great pleasure. Because whether it's here or anywhere else in the world, once you understand how these systems operate under pressure, you start to see the same patterns everywhere.
Exactly.
This is the Dave Pamah Show.